Hi there. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Marianne Gausche-Hill, and I'm the current president of the American Board of Emergency Medicine. And it's really exciting to see all of you with our ABM Advanced Emergency Medicine Ultrasonography Focus Practice Designation Informational Webinar. And the first Advanced Emergency Medicine Ultrasound exam is finally going to take place. It will be March 2022. And I want to thank all of you who've helped to make the focus practice designation a reality. It's really including the ultrasound community who's all joined in to provide their subject matter expertise. The Clinical Ultrasonography Task Force, who's done some heavy lifting, as well as the Emergency Ultrasound Fellowship Accreditation Council, or EUFAC. And finally, the Advanced Emergency Medicine Ultrasonography Exam Committee. So all have contributed significantly towards this effort. So it's an exciting time. Today, we're going to take the opportunity to provide you information about the exam, application, and eligibility criteria. And as you know, we've received a number of questions with your registrations. You can also ask questions during the webinar using the Q&A feature. We will respond to as many as we can during the webinar, but if you submit a question and there isn't time during the webinar to respond, our ABM staff will follow up with you directly. Just to be aware, today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with you via email when available and posted on the ABM website. And now I'm very happy to introduce my colleague and ABM director, as well as he is the chair of the AEMUS Exam Committee, John Kendall. John will give you a short presentation to summarize key points and answer commonly asked questions prior to opening up the webinar for live questions. Thanks again for joining us, and take it away, Dr. Kendall.
Thank you, Dr. Gausche-Hill. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody joining us today. I think this will be a very helpful informational session. If you've heard this presentation before, there's a little bit of a difference between this one and others, and it's because of feedback that we've gotten from the community and from those of you. We're really, I think, on a cusp of something that is monumental, and it's an important point not only for the ultrasound community in emergency medicine, but the specialty of emergency medicine, as well as the House of Emergency Medicine. And that is the Advanced Emergency Medicine Ultrasound Focused Practice designation. Before we get started, I just wanted to lay some groundwork on acronyms that are going to be listed in the presentation. So AEMUS is Advanced Emergency Medicine Ultrasonography. ABMS is the American Board of Medical Specialties. That's the board that oversees all of the medical boards, including emergency medicine, pediatric surgery, and so on. FPD stands for Focused Practice Designation. You've heard that before. EUFAC stands for Emergency Ultrasound Fellowship Accreditation. SCUF is the Society for Clinical Ultrasound Fellowship, and CUTF is the Clinical Ultrasound Task Force. I'll use all of those abbreviations and acronyms as we go on. So the Focused Practice Designation was actually approved by the ABMS in March of 2017, and the idea was to recognize an area of practice that either evolves as a physician progresses through their careers or emerges with an advance in medical knowledge. And when they set up the Focused Practice Designation, they developed certain criteria. First is that eligibility will be determined by each board, and there must be a single ABMS board issuing a Focused Practice Designation. So there can only be one board associated with each Focused Practice Designation. And this is different than, say, subspecialty in toxicology or, say, critical care, where there could be multiple boards that are associated with each subspecialty. Focused Practice Designation, it's a single board for each FPD. Clinical experience can also include fellowship training, so those two are not exclusive. In fact, they can be complementary. There has to be some form of an assessment as well as continuing certification as part of the criteria. And so when we talk about roles with the focus practice designation, ABM is the organization that determines the eligibility criteria. They also develop and administer the examination and then have oversight for continuing certification. EUFAC is the organization that it accredits the fellowship programs, and those are mutually exclusive and different roles in this process. EUFAC itself is a multi-organization independent group that's comprised of SCUF, AEM, ACEP, as well as SAME membership. ABM delegated authority to accredit the fellowship programs to EUFAC, and this is separate than the ACGME, similar but separate entities. And ABM will only recognize EUFAC accredited programs in this process. And if you do have questions about EUFAC, they have their website, I think, has quite a bit of information for any other details about that, and if you have specific questions for EUFAC. So in terms of the eligibility criteria that have been established by ABM, the first is that you have to be ABM certified. And then there are 3 different pathways that you can determine that you can get eligibility in order to take the exam and then become for this FPD. So the first is you can go graduate from a EUFAC accredited training program, and that is the training pathway. And then for those individuals who have graduated from a non-accredited fellowship program, then you're in the training plus practice pathway. And so you get the training plus you have to do additional ultrasound studies in addition to that. And then there's also a practice pathway for individuals who have not completed any fellowship training, either accredited or unaccredited. And that then implies that you have to do additional leadership, scholarship, as well as teaching requirements in addition to the ultrasound studies. And so here's some examples of eligibility pathways to try to determine or give an example of the difference between training and training plus practice pathways. So if a fellow at a program, that the fellowship becomes accredited in May of 2022 as an example, and then that fellow graduates in June 30th of 2022, then they graduate from an accredited training program, and therefore they would go into the training pathway. If a fellow graduates in June 30th of 2022, and then the program becomes accredited a month later, they graduated from an unaccredited training program, and they would then fall into the training plus practice pathway. And so in terms of the training plus practice pathway requirements, you get some credit for doing your unaccredited training program. So you don't have to apply under the practice only pathway. But the caveat is you can't have any of the studies that you did during the fellowship don't count towards the ultrasound studies for your eligibility criteria. In terms of the practice pathway, there are different components to it. There are 3 different. There's the leadership, scholarship, and teaching, and you only have to do 2 of the 3. You don't have to do all 3 of them. And these are just some examples. This is not an exhaustive list. So in terms of leadership, it's an ultrasound fellowship director, assistant, or associate director whose program has graduated at least 3 classes. So there's a demonstration of longevity in the leadership position. Scholarship is first, second, or senior author on 5 or more either peer-reviewed publications, articles, or book chapters, or some combination of those examples of scholarship. And then teaching is at least 5 ultrasound lectures at a minimum of 3 different conferences, and they can be regional, national, or international conferences. And again, there are some additional criteria. So for instance, in the teaching, in those that are in non-academic centers, there's examples of 10 hours of didactic instruction for either workshop or through professional development. There are courses that have CME associated with them that are not at your home institution. So there are some other examples that are on the website for eligibility criteria. If you're in the practice or the training plus practice, then there are required studies that need to be done. And this came out of a clinical ultrasound task force recommendation that you have to either perform or supervise an average of 300 studies a year. And then you have to review or for QI or do QA an average of 500 studies a year. And if you're in the training plus practice pathway, then that's over 24 months. It doesn't need to be contiguous, but it needs to be 24 months in the 5 years before you submit your application. If you're in the practice-only pathway, then it's over 36 months. Again, they don't need to be contiguous, but they need to be within the 5 years preceding submitting your application. And this is to give some idea of ongoing and spaced repetitive learning that's happening in either one of these different pathways. And so this is an important number or date to remember. So the eligibility deadline, those pathways had closed were initially scheduled to close on December 31st of 2025. And that date was chosen because it was the 5 years after the first program was accredited, and that was the length of the practice pathway. Based on feedback that the board received from the community and a number of other factors, we voted last month to actually extend that deadline to December 31st of 2026. And the idea is to give fellowships time to become EUFAC accredited, as well as to give individuals opportunities to actually meet the eligibility requirements, either over 2 or 3 years. But it's really, really important to remember this date, that the last date for unaccredited training is 2024. So those individuals who are entering a program in 2023, graduating in 2024, that will be the last date that you'd be able to get the 24 months of practice plus training in order to meet before the deadline, the eligibility deadline closes in December 31st of 2026. If you have additional questions about the eligibility criteria, you can use this QR code. All of this information is also on the website for those of you who want to see more of the specifics of either one of those pathways. So the application process is all housed on the ABMS site. So the first step is that you'll request an application, and then the staff will actually pre-screen that information that you've submitted. And if it appears that you could meet the requirements, then you will be given an application. You'll submit this application online, you'll receive receipt confirmation, and then the staff will verify the training and the practice information that you've included in the application. The next step is that the credentials committee of the board of directors for ABM will then review the application. And in some instances, they may need additional information. And then the applications can then be approved or denied, or there may be the need for getting additional information or change in the pathway. To give you a time frame, the first batch of applications have been submitted, will be reviewed actually this week by the credentials committee, with the expectation of decisions late in November 2022. So if you're in that process, you're in the pipeline, that's when we expect to be able to give you decisions. So let's talk a little bit about the AEMUS examination itself. The first thing I'll say is that it will be a rigorous assessment. And that implies psychometrically, it'll be a rigorous exam, and it'll follow the standards for all of the ABM examinations. And if we know from other past experiences, whether it be with EMS or MedTox or even emergency medicine back in the very early days of that initial administration, that the pass rate may be a little bit lower than what we would hope or what we would expect. And there are a number of different reasons for that, but what we also know is that as the learning community evolves, as the programs themselves, the fellowship programs evolve, then that pass rate will gradually go up. The exam itself will be based on the core content of the clinical ultrasound fellowship training, as well as the exam blueprint. And as Dr. Gausche-Hill mentioned, the first exam is going to be March 7th through the 11th, 2022. And it'll be administered at Pearson VUE testing centers in your region. Now the deadline is coming up here. So December 31st of 2021 is the deadline to be able to take this exam. And so in order to get that, you need to apply on the website. It also will be similar to EMS and TOX. It'll be an every other year exam. So the next one following this will be in 2024 and then 2026. And again, just as a reminder, the practice requirements have to be completed by December 31st of 2026. Now, that doesn't mean you need to pass the exam by then. You can actually, you would pass the exam after that. In fact, the next one would be in 2028. But you need to have your eligibility criteria completed by that, because that's when that pathway closes. This is the exam blueprint. This is also on the website. This was developed by surveying the SCUF membership. 2 different emails were sent out, email regarding the frequency of use, the acuity of use, and then the importance of the use. And this is how we developed the blueprint for the exam. And this is where the number of questions, or the percentage of questions in each one of these areas will happen. And that's how it'll be distributed on the exam itself. I did want to make a little bit of a point about how the test itself is going to be scored, and how it will be, the pass rate will be determined, or the passing score will be determined. And that's through a standard setting process. It's a process that we use through all of the ABM examinations that is separate from the actual development of the exam itself. And so a group of individuals that represent the community come together. They'll actually go through question by question. Individually, they'll make a determination of the percentage of minimally competent candidates who would get that item correct. They then come together, and then they do the test again, same process. And it's a very rigorous process called the modified Angoff process. It is not the committee who writes the actual exam. Ultimately, they'll come up with a score, a percentage that will be what the passing score will be. And everybody who gets that score above it will pass, and everybody below it will not. It's a criterion reference. It's not on. It's not graded on any kind of a curve. It's usually just a criterion reference that is used. This is the examination committee. This is a group that has put in a significant amount of time, thought, and effort into creating items that are fair, that represent the content, the core content of advanced emergency ultrasound. And I'm significantly indebted to their work in developing this exam and subsequent exams. If you want further information about the exam itself, you can get that here at this QR code. Again, it's also on the website with a number of different details about the examination itself. And then lastly, questions that you may have that you want to ask beyond in the chat today can be found at fpd@abm.org. They usually have a turnaround of 24 hours to answer your questions. And if you're not getting an answer beyond that, it might go to spam, but this is a place that you can ask questions. Are extremely receptive to anything that you may want to know. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions that may come through the chat. Please let us know anything that you may have questions about.
Hi, John. We've had several questions that have come through. The first one is really about the eligibility requirements. So how strict is the 500 studies QI'd? There's concern that the fellows graduated and joining community groups are not going to be able to achieve that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the eligibility criteria, first of all, is not that you have a QA system in place, or even something that is a robust system. It's that you're doing QA on studies. And there are a number of ways that requirement can actually be captured. It can be you're reviewing studies in real time of your colleagues in the emergency department. It could be that you're reviewing collected studies that they've acquired. It could be actually even collaborating with an academic area, an academic program, or maybe even another group. But it's demonstration that you're doing some form of quality assurance over the period of time, and that it's a minimum of 3 years. The other thing that I think gets confusing is it's not somebody QAing your studies. It's you're actually doing the quality assurance and performing the quality assurance on the studies of other individuals. The other caveat is it's not QAing studies in radiology. This is really studies in the emergency department being performed by emergency providers or other individuals who are working in that clinical care area.
Thank you, John. There's another question about the research requirement that is required for scholarly activity. I mean, there's just questioning why you have to do the PubMed IDs and why can't we just use just leadership and teaching as the requirements?
Yeah, so you can do leadership and teaching. You have to fulfill 2 of the 3. So for those individuals who are not doing scholarship or they've not published, that's okay, as long as you meet 2 of the 3 criteria. So hopefully that will make it eligible for folks who are not in that, that they're not doing a lot of writing, they're not producing scholarship, but yet you'd be able to demonstrate leadership. And I would also say that the eligibility criteria on the website gives you other examples of leadership. So I only gave a few of those, but there are other criteria for leadership that I also think apply to more of a community setting that I think are very responsive to the folks who may not be in an academic setting.
So I know there's been a question about how to find things on the website. And so I'm wondering if, John, we might want to have some AJ show folks how to find things on the website and navigate the information.
I think that'd be really helpful. AJ, can you give a little tour of the website?
Absolutely. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. To find information on the focused practice designation, you can go to ABM's website, www.abm.org. And from the homepage, in the middle of the page, select the button for Become Certified. On the left navigation, you'll scroll down slightly. At the bottom option, you'll see Focused Practice Designation. Go ahead and select that. This page provides background information on the FPD. Then to view information on the Advanced Emergency Medicine Ultrasonography, you go back to the left-hand navigation, and the last option, it will say Advanced EM Ultrasonography. You can go ahead and select that. On this page, you can find exam dates and fees in this dropdown at the top, related information and documents to the right. You can also scroll down to find eligibility, including a link to print or download the eligibility criteria on the right. You can also find training information as well as exam information. Thank you.
Great, thanks, AJ. That's really helpful.
John, there was a follow-up question to one of your responses about the teaching requirement appears to require external lecturers, which would limit teaching to a fairly small cadre of graduates relative to the total possible eligible candidates. Can you speak to that a little bit or clarify that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are other eligibility criteria for teaching. For example, 10 hours given to in the context of a workshop or professional development, or courses or other education that has CME associated with it. And so just doing national, international, that's not the only criteria. Again, there are a number of others that I do think allow individuals to be able to demonstrate that they are active in education, active in teaching, even if they're not doing it nationally or internationally.
So you talked about having to complete the requirements within 5 years. Is that within 5 years of submitting the application or within 5 years of taking the exam?
So the 5 years is preceding the point that you've submitted your eligibility criteria. So you can think of it as if I submit my application today for eligibility, then it's the 5 years preceding that I need to demonstrate the studies that I've been performing or supervising, studies that I've been QAing. The other eligibility criteria, for instance, the leadership, teaching, scholarship, are not confined to that 5 years. They can go back beyond that.
There are a number of process-related questions, one of which is how the QA is done, what they have to submit to show proof of quality assurance or the practice pathway requirements. Do you want to speak to that, or potentially have Angie McGough speak to some of that?
Yeah, why don't I have Angie talk to how that, how we can verify that, or the verification process. Angie, would you mind?
Sure. So what happens is when you submit your application, you're going to be asked for both training and practice that you provide to give us the name and the contact information of someone who can verify that information. You're not going to give us data related to your studies. You're not going to give us a specific number. What you're going to do is tell us that you have met that criteria, and then give us the information that we need to contact someone that'll verify that information for you. We'll reach out to them by email. They'll have a form that they'll have to sign that says that, yes, that information that you presented on the application is accurate.
And Angie, do you want to speak to some of the questions related to contacting the office, responding to emails, when they should begin to hear after submission of materials or submission of the application?
Sure. So the first thing that I would say is when you contact the office, many of us are working remote, but we do answer emails and voicemails. The thing that I would say is make sure that ABM is a safe sender. Whitelist us on your email. We're finding a lot of times people we're sending responses or emails that are ending up in spam folders, particularly if you're using an institutional email. A lot of them have a higher spam filtering process, and some of our stuff ends up there. Also, what happens is we use the contact information that you have provided to us and listed with us as your preferred way to reach you. So that's in your personal page.
I think Angie may have frozen.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead
Data
to another.
information.
There you go. We'll go back to a different question and then come back to Angie. John, for the practice pathway, why is it that you can meet the leadership criteria, including giving lectures to your own residents and students, doing hands-on workshops for your residents and students, QA, QI images, and other education and administrative tasks involved in running an academic program, but this does not count for the scholarship teaching component unless you give lectures for CME credit outside your own department or institution? It seems to be a considerable amount of work that is geared more towards larger academic centers with bigger budgets. Can you speak to that, especially for those in community programs that are trying to address these type of application criteria?
That was a long question.
Yeah, I think it's just it's speaking to some of the challenges you have when you're in smaller programs. You don't see as much. And why do some things count and others? It seems to be gearing more towards the bigger academic centers.
Yeah, when the eligibility criteria were developed by the Clinical Ultrasound Task Force, there was a concerted effort to represent as many different opportunities that for eligibility that individuals could have, whether they be in the community or academic. But there also was a sense that there had to be a certain standard of what we were expecting folks to be able to continue to do once they had graduated from a non-accredited program, or if they were in the practice only pathway. And I don't know, I don't recall all of the aspects of that question, but I do think there are some opportunities, if you look at them, to be able to do development with your faculty that are non-CME. So you can just do development that or ultrasound workshops that will meet that criteria. So and 10 hours, I think, over a 5-year period of time seems like something that most who are doing ultrasound would likely be able to meet.
So for the Training Plus pathway, why is there a 2-year requirement of practice before being eligible for the exam?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's to demonstrate that somebody has longevity and this continual and some repetition behind not only studies that they're doing, but then also doing QA. The Training Plus pathway, if you think about the variety of different programs and the that folks are going to be entering that pathway, there's quite a bit of variability there. And so this does allow someone to demonstrate that they have continued learning, continued practice, and continued involvement in ultrasound programs.
And to just clarify, is the practice pathway the only pathway that requires the 2 of 3 leadership, scholarship, and teaching requirements? Fellowship graduates are expected to do other things. Is that correct?
Correct. So the common requirement for Training Plus practice and practice are the ultrasound studies, performing, and doing QI. The only pathway that requires leadership, scholarship, or teaching is the practice only pathway. So those individuals who have not done fellowship training of some sort.
Are there going to be review guides or courses available specifically for this exam?
Not that are sponsored by ABM, but I have heard that there are reviews that are and groups that are developing reviews, but none that are sponsored by ABM.
And will there be a continuing certification requirement related to the FPD once earned?
Correct. Yeah, all of the exams that ABM has, in fact, all of the certifications that other boards have are required to do continuing certification by the ABMS. We don't know what that's going to look like now, but there will be some form of continuing certification as part of this focused practice designation.
And can you speak a little bit to the questions we often get about, what's going to be the expected pass rate? There's often a discussion about, we expect X number to fail, and that's not really how, as you explained, our exams work. So can you just reiterate or speak a little bit about the pass rate question?
Right. We don't know what the pass rate is going to be. That's going to be up to the standard setting process to develop what that actual score is, that it becomes what the passing score is. I think, so I talked about this at ASAP, and I think I may have said it incorrectly, so I want to just be clear that if the standard setting committee says that the passing score should be 85%, then that everyone above that passes, everybody below that doesn't. They also may say that the passing score should be 30%, and everybody who gets above 30% will pass, everybody who goes below will not. We don't know. It's the standard setting is a process where those in the community, those representative group of individuals who have taken the exam come together and actually determine what that is. I don't know what it will be. What I know that we're doing as a test development committee is trying to create items that are fair, that represent the core content, and then the standard setting will happen separate from that. But we don't know what it actually is going to be. In terms of when passing scores have been lower than expected in for instance, EMS or med talks, some of that has to do with just the heterogeneity of the group of individuals who are taking that initial exam, that they come from very different backgrounds, but then as time goes on, that the learning community actually evolves and the passing score improves. I don't know if that's what's going to happen with ultrasound, but all I know is that the process of standard setting is something that we've used and we use for all of the examinations through ABM.
Can you speak a little bit to costs? There have been questions about the cost of the exam and why it's so high. Can you speak a little bit as to the cost structure?
I actually don't have any information personally about what the cost structure is. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Marianne, if you can help with that, or Melissa potentially.
I don't know, maybe staff can weigh in. Generally, the costs are to cover staff time in the administration of any exam that we do, but I'll let one of the staff speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the costs for the exam cover essentially the exam development process, which is fairly extensive, and the item writing components. So the work that's done on exam development and administration, there's also costs that are associated with even sitting through Pearson or Prometric or wherever you're going to be taking an exam, frankly, as well as the content itself. So there are substantive expenses that go into that, that we often end up having to, in some cases, subsidize, so that we can try to keep the costs lower, especially for those who are younger in their careers. And so those, again, it's going to be a number of different exam components related to essentially item development, item administration, because it's a several-year process as well. And again, this is also an area in which this is a large technology because of the type of exam this is and the what you'll be doing in terms of that. And so there are just additional costs that are associated with it.
I will
I
say
think the
that
key thing, just to comment, John, and to dovetail what Kathleen said, is we generally are quite sensitive to what the costs are and really do try to keep the costs down as much as possible, and yet try to recover development costs and implementation costs as best we can. And we don't always achieve that as well as whatever's best for the community.
and there are certain aspects of this exam that Pearson VUE has had to develop very specific for this exam. It's different than others that they've done with video and control of the video, control of the images. So there is quite a bit of development that has occurred actually with Pearson VUE that is a cost that ABM has had to pay.
Yeah, there have been a number of questions that have come up actually about EUFAC fellowships, about program requirements and things like that. And we just wanted to make sure folks are aware that those questions really have to be answered by EUFAC. We can provide you with their email address to ask some of them. I think there have been some questions about program faculty and the requirements for the fellowship programs. That is not under our purview. That is under the purview of EUFAC. And so those questions are going to be better directed to them. I think as a couple of final questions, is there, what is the value in getting this? I mean, why do it? Why get a focused practice designation in AEMUS?
I think that's a great question. The focused practice designation is going to recognize an expertise that emergency physicians are going to have with sophisticated, comprehensive knowledge of advanced emergency ultrasound. And it'll be different than what residents have. The residents have expertise in applying ultrasound in the emergency department, but they don't have all of the, the breadth and the depth of understanding of advanced techniques, research, quality improvement. And I don't know exactly what the market will be, but I have a sense that there'll be value in somebody who's FPD certified versus someone who's not. In an organization that's looking for a leader, looking for someone who, whether it be a program or other aspects of development, and I don't know what that will be, but I suspect that it will be a demarcator between those who have and those who do not.
I think there's a lot of pride in being a recognized specialist in anything, so there's additional value. But from, potential practice opportunities, as John alluded to, any subspecialty or any additional training is looked upon as value added. So I do believe that there are some advantages in terms of practice opportunities for those who get the FPD and advanced ultrasound.
And I think many of us on this webinar are fully cognizant of multiple other specialties are using ultrasound or evolving ultrasound in their clinical practice. This is a unique area for emergency medicine and for our specialty. And I think that will mean something as well, that it won't be just a local benefit, but there'll be benefit that really goes beyond just emergency medicine or our clinical sites where we work.
And I just wanted to alert folks that if you look in the Q&A, Sabine Gifford has put an email address in there for all the fellowship program questions to please go ahead and email that address, inquiries@eufacouncil.org. And so for those of you that have had questions really about, I think, a lot of the program faculty, et cetera. So there have been a couple other questions, one of which was, will QA to pre-hospital providers count in terms of eligibility?
That would be a decision that the credentials committee would have to weigh. I don't know that it is specific, though, to just physicians. So you can imagine a number of different care providers who are doing ultrasound that you have oversight over them, and that QA is part of it. I don't know that I'm going to make a determination on this call whether it would meet. But I think that's something that the credentials committee would consider. And I don't think that it'll be rigid to just a physician oversight, that there are many other care providers who are doing ultrasound.
There have been a couple other questions about if you don't pass this next exam in March, how long do you remain eligible and when can you take the exam again?
So you'd be able to take the exam in 2 years from that, whatever that date was. So if you took it and did not pass in 22, then you'd be eligible to continue to take it again in 24. You wouldn't have to submit eligibility again. That would already be done. You would just have to register for the exam, and then you would be able to take it. You wouldn't have to submit another fee or do anything. Essentially, it's just registering for the exam. As currently, there is not a timeline of when your eligibility to take the exam would expire. And so presumably you could take it indefinitely. I don't know if it's going to stay that way, but the currently there is not a limit on how long you'd have to be able to take it.
All right. So I'm ABMS certified in a PEDS EM fellowship. Am I allowed to take this exam? Can other fellows who did pediatric residencies take the exam if they are in the same PEDS EM fellowship with me?
So Yes, so that's a nuanced question. So if you are ABMS certified and you've done a pediatric fellowship or pediatric and then an ultrasound fellowship, then yes, you'd be able to apply with either the training or the training plus practice pathway. But if you have colleagues who are board certified in pediatrics who are in the same ultrasound fellowship, they would not be eligible because they're board certified by the American Board of Pediatrics. So it's American Board of Emergency Medicine certified, then going through either an accredited or an unaccredited program, you would be eligible to be able to sit for the exam.
And so do lectures and workshops I give for my own residents and students within my own department as an ultrasound director count in terms of the teaching requirement for the practice pathway?
I don't think those actually count. So it needs to be outside CME related, national, international, or regional, but not just local lectures given internally in your program.
All right, we're going to see if there are some questions. I wonder if Angie could come back on because there have been some questions about the verifier and if there are resources for folks to for the verifier, like who qualifies for it, what are the rules for someone to be a verifier, and how that they can attest to the different components. So I wonder, if, Angie, if you could speak to the role of the verifier, if we have resources as to who can be a verifier and the information that they need to do that work.
Sure. So for a verifier, what we're looking for is somebody that knows enough about your practice to be able to be comfortable in that verification. So a department chair, if there is a program, an ultrasound program in your department, the program director, someone like that would have knowledge and would be able to be a verifier there. If you have questions about that, please contact the office. We can walk through that with you. I know some people have, you know, depending on where they're practicing, that's very limited, and they have a lot of questions specifically. And those are the kinds of things, if you reach out to ABM, we can help you with.
All right, I'm not seeing other questions come in. Why don't we leave it to both of you to share any last thoughts. I do want to remind folks that a recording of this session will be available and will be sent to those who registered for the session. A link to the recording will be made available to you. And we also encourage you to go to the website and email fpd@abm.org with additional questions. So with that, I will turn it over to John and Marianne for any last thoughts.
I did see one other question that was in the chat, which is what type of questions are there going to be? Are they going to be multiple choice, fill in? And they will be multiple choice questions. It will not be an oral exam. The initial certification will be multiple choice questions. But I just want to say thank you to everyone. Fantastic questions. Please keep asking those questions. Every time I've done the talk, it's changed from the previous, and it's based on input from the community. I'm really excited for us to be moving forward with this. Again, I think we're really on the cusp of something that's very special and that we all can be very proud of. So thank you very much for all of your input. Thank you for your interest today. Again, please continue to ask questions and help us to make this as good as we possibly can.
I just want to take a moment and thank John for his leadership here, and for all of you who are contributing, and to our wonderful staff who answer your questions on a daily basis, and they'll continue to do so. Remember that as an organization, we want to be there for you to help you answer your questions and move your career forward. That's our goals, and really to help you get there. So anyway, thanks to everyone, and really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to this. I think this is another tremendous opportunity for emergency physicians to expand their practice. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.